Hello, friends, and welcome
all
back
our viewers.
to ABN and the Trinity channel for the 2016 Apologetics Marathon. This is our first Apologetics Marathon of the year, so it is an honor and a privilege to have you here with us. This week, we have about 20 shows on all different topics. Just a few hours ago, we had a show called Does Islam Elevate the Status of Women? And ABN and the Trinity channel are so good at getting those shows uploaded quickly to the YouTube channel that you can find that there right now. And we're now starting our second show of the marathon. We still have 2 other shows this evening. But this show is going to be on a pro-life apologetics category for Christians out there. You know what that is. And also, for everyone else, the title of this show is The Case for Life Inside and Outside the Womb. Some people think that when a baby is unborn, that is when it has rights, or that's when it does not have rights, and vice versa. Sometimes people say outside the womb, a person should have more rights or less rights, etc. So we're going to make the case for life inside and outside the womb. And just like on every other show, we have a number of guests with us. And our first guest is right here to my left in the studio. This is Genevieve Marnin. She is the Public Affairs Associate and Media Spokesperson for Right to Life of Michigan, and she began working with them in 2012. She also works as an associate lobbyist advancing pro-life legislation at the Capitol in Lansing. She researches topics surrounding the life issues and works with legislators crafting pro-life bills. She has been involved in the successful passage of several laws, including clinic regulations, removal of built-in abortion coverage from insurance, and requiring hospitals to publish their fetal care policies. Genevieve has worked as an educator in both public and private schools and an alternative education high school, where she witnessed firsthand some of the real-life difficulties associated with crisis pregnancies. She holds a bachelor's degree in biology from Oakland University, and we all want to welcome Genevieve on our show.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. It's a blessing to have you. And we also have 3 Skype guests as well. Our first Skype guest is Josh Brahm. Josh has worked in the pro-life movement since he was 18 years old. And after 12 years of full-time pro-life work, he launched Equal Rights Institute to maximize his impact for the movement. Josh's primary passion is helping pro-life people to be more persuasive when they communicate with pro-choice people. That means ditching faulty rhetoric and tactics and embracing arguments that hold up under philosophical scrutiny. He has participated in a number of public debates, and he has written a number of pro-life articles, and he is the president of Equal Rights Institute. So we want to welcome Josh Brahm to our show.
Glad to be here.
Thank you for being here. Our second Skype guest is Clinton Wilcox. Clinton Wilcox is a pro-life apologist and speaker from Sanger, California. He is a certified mentor and speaker for Justice for All, a staff apologist with Life Training Institute, and the Voices for Life director at Tulare King's Right to Life. As a pro-life apologist, Clinton specializes in making a reasoned case for the pro-life position from science and philosophy, and in training pro-life people to make the pro-life case more effectively and persuasively. Clinton believes that if you treat pro-choice people respectively and take their ideas seriously, you will have a much greater chance of changing their heart and mind on the issue. He has interacted with pro-choice people in various mediums, including college campuses in 4 different states, online through social media, and even in public debate. So welcome Clinton Wilcox to the show.
Oh, thank you. Very glad to be here.
Our third Skype guest is Dr. Richard Weichert. He is a professor of modern European history at California State University, Stanislaus, and a senior fellow at Discovery Institute's Center for Science and Culture. He has appeared in several documentaries, including Ben Stein's Expelled, No Intelligence Allowed. He has spoken at many universities in the United States and England, and he's also a best-selling author. He has published 4 books, including From Darwin to Hitler, Evolutionary Ethics, Eugenics, and Racism in Germany. That was published in 2004. But he has 2 new books in 2016. Actually, one of them just came out a couple weeks ago, and it's titled The Death of Humanity and the Case for Life. In September, his next book will be released, and it's titled Hitler's Religion, The Twisted Beliefs That Drove the Third Reich. And I'm sure many of you out there either think that Hitler was a Christian, or you hear other people say Hitler was a Christian. So Dr. Richard Weikart is an expert in this field, and his books are ones that you're going to want to pick up wherever fine books are sold. So welcome, Dr. Richard Weikart, to the show.
Yes, thanks for having me on.
Our pleasure. So, as we told our viewing audience around the world, this show is the case for life inside and outside the womb. So we have a couple of pro-life apologists here, both of them, whom of which are Christians. And then we have Dr. Richard Weikart as well, who's a Christian, but he is, again, has an expert in the field of eugenics and the Third Reich, Hitler, and the Death of Humanity and the Case for Life, which is his newest book. So we think this is a great panel, and with Genevieve right here in the studio, to talk about this case for life. And many of you know about abortion, or the killing of what we say is a human being in the womb. Mm-hmm. Now, we just don't want to say, okay, all abortion's wrong right off the bat. We want to make a case for this. We want to make a case for life in general.
Yes.
Okay. And the way that we want to go about it is, I want to start just, okay, what are the terms that people use when they're talking about pro-choice, or it's okay to have an abortion, that kind of thing. So during the show, we want to talk about the terms people use, and we want to define these terms. We're going to bring in science, we're going to bring in apologetics, we're going to bring in philosophy, history, and a lot of good resources for the Christians around the world. Mm-hmm. And if you are a person who considers yourself pro-choice right now, you think, well, if a woman wants to have an abortion, that's her right, she should be able to do that. We want to give you something to think about during this show, which is about 90 minutes long, and it was such a blessing to have you here. So what I want to do first is look at the common terms that are used by pro-choice people. I hear the terms tissue, embryo, zygote, fetus, and these are different terms that are used for whatever is inside there, right? Whatever is inside of a woman's womb. How often are these terms used by pro-life people? Genevieve?
Fetus is used very often, so
Okay.
is embryo.
Okay.
Those are scientific terms. Fetus just means little one in Latin.
Okay.
So an embryo is a very specific stage of development, up to
Okay.
8 weeks. And then after that, it's considered a fetus. So it's not that we don't shy away from the scientific terms,
Mm-hmm.
but we also like to refer to it as what it is. It's a human baby.
Okay.
So we do use the word baby.
Okay. Oh, no problem. No problem. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. I'd like to ask Josh Braum, when does life begin? This is a hard question for a lot of people to answer. People have said that it's above their pay grade and stuff like that. But when does life begin scientifically? And we know that science doesn't say anything, scientists do. But scientifically, when does life begin?
Yeah, I'm glad that you asked that question so specifically, because usually what happens is a pro-choice person will say no one knows when life begins, and I don't know yet what they're talking about. Do they mean we don't know when a person has begun, or do they just mean something biological like what you asked? And so I think you asked the much more simple question. We know exactly when biological life begins, and there's no really debate among the experts in science on this, the embryologists. We know that by the time the process of fertilization is complete, you have a living human organism. We know it's alive because it's growing, it's reacting to stimuli, it's metabolizing food into energy. We know that it is human, biologically human, a member of the species Homo sapiens, because they came from 2 human parents. And we know that it is an organism because we can observe the kinds of things it does. It's very different from the mother's body. It's now its own independent entity with its parts working for the good of its own whole. And so it's its own organism. And that's not really disputed among embryologists. It's not disputed among the experts on the issue.
Okay. And it's so common to hear these terms, and for so many people to ask that question, because they say, is that a life, or is it alive? Is it not alive? When does it become alive? people don't really think that, well, life begets life. Even an unfertilized egg is alive, and a sperm is alive, and those can only come from someone, a being before them who has life, etc., and that's passed on. Clinton, I want to turn to you, and sometimes a person says that, well, this thing inside of a woman, it's not human if we use these different terms, like tissue, embryo, zygote, fetus, and that it has to get to a certain level before it's actually human. So they usually basically say, okay, well, it's potentially human. It's not human right now. But is this scientifically accurate? And if not, why not?
Okay, well, we have to go back, first of all, to what Josh said a moment ago, where if you say no one knows when life begins, well, he doesn't know what you're talking about until you kind of cash that out a little bit. Same goes for the term human, because people can mean human in a biological sense, like, it's a human being right from fertilization because it's not a cat or it's not a dog. Or they can mean human in the moral sense, which is it may be biologically human, but it's no fundamentally different than one of my body parts. And so it's not something that we should protect. It's not a human being that has a right to life. So a lot of people have different ideas of when it becomes a human, when it enters what they say the moral community. I think that I really don't think that there is really a difference between a human being and a human person specifically, because being a person is about what kind of thing you are, not what kind of things you can do. So when someone says that the unborn organism is a potential person, they're actually confusing two different types of potential, that there's an active potential and a passive potential. A passive potential is when something basically ceases to exist and becomes something else, such as when you chop down a tree and turn it into a house. But then there's an active potential. An active potential is a potential that something has within itself to develop and become. And since it has that power within itself, then when those changes occur, it doesn't cease to exist. It retains its identity and it continues to be the very same thing. So if we're using the tree as an example, a tree sapling has the active potential to become a mature oak or maple or whatever tree family it is, because it will become that more mature tree on its own. But it has a passive potential to become a house or a desk, because it doesn't have that potential within itself. It must be killed. It must cease being what it is by an outside builder and become something different, become something brand new, take on a new identity. So when someone says the unborn is a potential person, or a potential human, they're confusing those two types of potential. So it's that the unborn is an actual human with potential.
Okay. And again, that's when we have to make the case that what kind of fetus is it? Even if you want to use those terms, right? What kind of fetus is it? What kind of zygote? What kind of embryo? Is it a human fetus? Is it some type of animal fetus, etc., right? But it's the humanness which sets that apart from every other thing that we see, right?
Right, yeah.
Dr. Richard Weichert, what do you see in the work that you've done on history and in the Third Reich and in all the areas that you have studied? What do you see as a strong case against abortion when we have made that case that this is human, and yes, it's inside the womb, but it's still human? I mean, what kind of arguments can we give? And again, arguing for our audience, arguing doesn't mean fighting. Arguing is giving a reasonable defense for why we believe what we believe. So, Dr. Weichert, what would you say to a person who says, well, yeah, it's human, but if I can exterminate it if I want to?
Well, one of the things that we see here in this whole debate over this issue is that by trying to distinguish between persons and non-persons is very often how the debate gets shaped in bioethics circles today. They're creating a human inequality. They're saying some humans are worthy of protection, some humans are not worthy of protection. And what I've noticed is that those lines are completely arbitrary. If you look historically at the way people draw these different lines, they get drawn different ways at different times by different people. And so there's no real clear lines that you can draw. Peter Singer may draw his lines at some level of rationality. He's one of the most famous bioethicists in the world today. And he claims that birth is not a clear dividing line. In fact, he agrees with pro-life people that birth is not a clear dividing line between that gives value to human life, because that's what the law of the land is today, right now. That birth is the dividing line that we have legally in our society as to what defines a person and a non-person, according to what the Supreme Court has ruled. However, if you look historically, people have drawn the line at all sorts of different places. They've drawn the line at different races. Some races have value, some races don't have value. They've drawn the line at different mental abilities. Some people with certain mental abilities have value, some people with lesser mental abilities don't have value. So it's completely arbitrary how they're trying to define who is a, quote, person and who is a non-person.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. A question for Josh that I have is, are there any bad pro-life arguments? So let's start off with the bad stuff first, I guess, before we get to the good stuff. What bad pro-life arguments have you heard from people when they are trying to make a case for life, but they're not really seeming to be doing a good job of it? I mean, or you just say, hey, that was good, but here's how you can word that better, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I don't want to pick on pro-lifers. I think we have a lot of well-meaning people that are doing their
Yes.
best, trying to defend the unborn. There's this huge human civil rights injustice going on, but then sometimes we kind of stumble upon things that sound good on the surface, but then aren't actually that persuasive. And at Eagle Rights Institute, we're really interested in what will actually be persuasive. So one example of what I think is not a good pro-life argument would be kind of the Beethoven argument. I don't know if you've heard this, where it's kind of like, well, gee, what if abortion had been illegal, like, hundreds of years ago, and then Beethoven could have been aborted? Or I've heard versions where it's like the cure of cancer. Maybe we've aborted the person who would have cured cancer, or even Jesus. What if Jesus had been aborted? That kind of thing. And I don't think this is a good argument because it implies, well, first of all, it works both ways. If we've aborted people that could have cured cancer, we've also aborted rapists and things like that. So that's not persuasive on that level. But even if it was, it implies that the pro-choice worldview is correct. A lot of pro-choice people believe that your value is instrumental. It's based on what you can either do functionally or the value that you provide to society. And that's not our view. The pro-life view is that your value as a human being is intrinsic. It is based, like Clinton Wilcox said, based on the kind of thing that you are, a human being. A valuable person. And so when someone says, well, gee, what if Beethoven would have been aborted? It's like, it's implying that Beethoven's primary value, or maybe even only value, was the sonatas and symphonies that he composed. No, but Beethoven shouldn't have been aborted because he was a human being, and nor should any other human being, regardless of what they would have ended up doing in their future. So I believe that is one of those kind of tools in some people's toolboxes that we should kind of throw away and replace with others, because there are fantastic pro-life arguments, and I want to see us focusing on those.
Definitely, definitely. Now, we want to get more into the apologetics and giving a case why abortion is wrong. But Genevieve here actually brought a few
Fetal models.
fetal models
Yeah.
and tools that are actually used
Right.
in abortions. And we want to actually let people know, if you don't know how abortions work or what exactly happens with that, she's going to give you a visual here of what is used. But which one would you like to do first? The
We'll go smaller to bigger.
Okay, let's
That's
do that.
okay.
Let's do
Smaller
that.
to bigger. What I have here, and I don't know if you can see it, it's about 8 weeks, and it's really quite developed. At 8 weeks gestation, babies have every organ. They have their fingers, their toes, every organ that they will ever have. Their heart's beating, there's blood flowing. This baby can be killed with an abortion pill, which is now the tool of choice by the abortion industry because it's portable, it's easy, etc. The FDA just raised the limits from that to that.
and this one here, if
This
anyone
is-
couldn't see that, that's
Yeah.
maybe about an inch
Yeah,
long.
about an inch long. That's a fetal model, about 8 weeks.
Okay.
And they've raised it to 10 weeks. And there's a big difference in fetal development at that very, very small gestational age. And about 25% of abortions in America, anyway, are done with the abortion pill, RU486. So women are self-aborting, and these babies are being killed at home, and that baby's pretty good size. Women are going to see these babies in their toilets. I mean, I hate to say it, but that's what's going to happen. So that's from the abortion pill. About 67% of babies this size are killed with this instrument. This is a suction curette, and this is the instrument that abortionists use in suction abortions. And as you can see, this baby doesn't fit through this tube. It has to be sucked to pieces to go through this tube. About 67% of abortions are performed that way.
Okay.
And last but not least, at least in America, I can't speak for the worldwide numbers, but this size baby is routinely aborted in America using this instrument, and the abortionist will go in through to the uterus and will literally grasp the arms and the legs, pulling them off the living child. The baby will literally bleed to death. You can imagine the excruciating pain. Yeah. And then they crush the skull and pull the baby out. That's what an abortion is. That is abortion.
Okay. And I want to give you, I want to give these devil's advocate type of questions where abortion is okay because this, or in the case of this. And just based on your models there, I want to ask you this question, because sometimes people say abortion is okay if the, and then they fill in the blank, zygote, fetus, whatever, cannot feel pain.
Right.
So what would you say, especially with using those models there, even that little 1-inch one?
Yeah.
If someone say, oh yeah, abortion's okay because the whatever, fill in the blank, cannot feel pain.
Right. Well, that would be the same argument that you could make to say, well, it's perfectly okay to murder somebody as long as you anesthetize them first. It's a living human being. It's maybe small, and maybe it doesn't feel the pain, but you're still exterminating its life. And so we, in the pro-life movement, believe that regardless of the size of the baby, regardless of the age and the development and its ability, that it's not okay to take its life.
Okay. And I want to give another one of those devil's advocate questions to Clinton. Clinton, if you hear someone say, abortion is okay because the unborn is part of the woman's body, how would you answer that?
Oh, that's a kind of a big question. So I'll try to answer it as brief as possible. When someone says that the unborn is part of the woman's body, there's actually at least 3 different things they could mean from it. They could mean that it's literally inside the woman's body, that it's in the womb as opposed to outside in the world. That's a very, very rare argument. I've only heard only 1 or 2 people who I've ever spoken to have made that argument, that it becomes a person once it's born because it changes that location. That's obviously not a very good argument. It's one that we don't really address because rarely anyone hardly makes it. Then they might mean one of 2 other things. That number one, the woman's body is what Trent Horn refers to as sort of a sovereign zone, that a woman can do whatever she wants to anything inside her body. And I think that's very difficult to justify, because I think we have very strong, first of all, we have very strong intuition that we can't just do anything we want with our body or to anything in our body. Most people would say that it's wrong for you to commit suicide. So it seems like, at least intuitively, we understand there are limits to what we can do in our body. But we would also say that just because the unborn organism, the unborn, embryo or fetus, if you want to use the non-emotional terms, just because that unborn entity is there in the womb, doesn't necessarily give her carte blanche to do whatever she wants to it. And I think we can use, a few different hypothetical situations to show this. So, I'll just talk about 1 or 2. That number one, if she could do anything she wants with anything in her body, then we would have to say that any sort of abortion, no matter how outlandish or extreme, would be permissible. If she wants to, if she wanted a girl but she's having a boy, she should be able to have an abortion. If she wants to ride the roller coasters at Disneyland but she's 9 months along, she should be able to have an abortion. But most people, including pro-choice people, would agree with us that late-term abortions are wrong. And so we can use that as a sort of common ground to show that there are limits to what we can do to something inside our body. And I think most people would agree that we can't necessarily torture the unborn embryo or fetus in the womb. So if we can't torture it, it seems like there are still limits to what we can do to that unborn child. So it seems like the idea that she can do whatever she wants to anything inside her body is implausible intuitively, and implausible if you really think of what that of the logic that would entail. I think it leads to unpalatable conclusions. Now, the best argument that they could be making is comes from Judith Jarvis Thompson. She wrote an essay back in 1972 called A Defense of Abortion, in which she basically argues if you wake up one day in bed attached to a famous violinist, and he's attached to you at the kidneys, and he's dying of a kidney ailment, and you must remain plugged into him, otherwise he'll die. And so we can't unplug you because that would be killing the violinist, and the violinist is a person. She would argue that you may have the moral right to unplug. You may not have, it may be immoral for you to unplug, but we should not legally compel someone to remain plugged in. So the idea behind this argument is that a woman, including a mother, should not be legally forced to remain as life support for her unborn child. It might be, indecent, or it might even be, we might take pity on the child, but it's her decision because she should not be legally forced. And again, I think this is highly implausible on the surface because, number one, and Thompson is quite open about this, it assumes that parents have no natural obligations to their offspring. And I think that's a dangerous idea. To say that parents have no natural obligations to their offspring. I think it's actually pretty obvious that we do have obligations to our own offspring. Certainly, we have more obligation to our offspring than we do to a complete stranger. And in the violinist scenario, the violinist is a complete stranger, but we're trying to draw a moral equivalence to a woman pregnant with her own child. I think there's a disanalogy there. But probably the best response for that is that in the vast majority of cases around, the vast majority of pregnancies, the woman and the man are responsible for not only the child's creation, but placing the child in a state of dependency upon her. Since she is responsible in that way, she owes the child compensation, and so we have every right to legally compel her to remain plugged in, since she's responsible both for the child's creation and placing the child in a state of dependency upon her. So I think that grounds her obligation. I think that grounds our rightness in legally compelling her to do so, because it was her decision to have sex with her boyfriend or husband, which was the act that leads to procreation, which leads to these events taking place.
Okay, that was a lot of information for people, and a lot of good information. So we appreciate that. We're going to take a short break, but when we come back, I want to turn to Dr. Richard Weichert and a couple of things that Clinton had mentioned there, talking about torture, talking about the natural relationships between parents and their children, that kind of thing, and what you have seen in relationship to those things with the history that you have studied, and a case that you can make for the value of of course, the family ties and the torture that you have seen take place when life has not been valued outside the womb. So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back in just a couple of minutes, so we'll see you soon.
Trinity Channel is now publicly streaming on Roku. There is no need for a code anymore, and through Roku, you can watch us 24/7 on your TV. You can find us through two ways on Roku. The first way is through the streaming channel category. The second way is by searching for Trinity Channel in your search bar. For more information, please call the numbers at your screen. Did you know that ABN and Trinity Channel is currently spreading the Word of God in 4 different languages to 5 continents? ABN is a multilingual satellite TV network that is broadcasting in English, Arabic, Aramaic, and Kurdish languages.
رابي غزيلا خاء وبطراض السطان بشمخ ولا شو قلن.
Jesus Christ, oh hallelujah, he's not just the prophet far greater than Muhammad, but he is the Son of God. And at one day every knee will bow and every tongue shall confess that Jesus Christ is Lord.
أو بكوي راس باردي بابا مسيايا كبابي إيمي وبابي همو كسيكا.
الإسلام قلب المفاهيم، اعتبر الغزو شريعة، اعتبر السبي شريعة، اعتبر سرقة الغنائم قانونا وشريعة.
Did you know that we are also building awareness to the West about jihad and terrorism through Christian apologetics? Terrorist groups, ISIS, and Islamic jihadists continue to become an increasing problem in the world. This is one of our many challenges that we are facing today. Would you like to stand with us in declaring the truth through our Lord Jesus Christ? By your prayers and support, we will be able to continue the good work through ABN and Trinity Channel. Your support is always welcomed and needed. To donate, please visit our website at trinitychannel.com and click Donate, or call the number at your screen.
Are you looking at me? Either one.
Did you know that ABN has been on air for 10 years and started broadcasting to North America through the Galaxy 19 satellite? Now ABN and Trinity Channel programs are being aired to 4 continents through 3 different satellites. These satellites cover North America, Mexico, Central America and the Caribbean, Australia, New Zealand, North Africa, Europe, and the Middle East. One of these satellites is Nilesat, the most popular satellite in the Middle East. Though the coverages are great and our passion is to spread the word of God to as many countries as possible in 4 different languages, this mission definitely has a big cost in our airtime. We are here to ask for your prayers and your support in bringing the truth from the word of God to the whole world and to set people free. You can support ABN in 4 different ways. Please visit our website at trinitychannel.com and click Donate. You can go through the ABN apps, or you can send your check to the P.O. box listed below, or you can call the numbers at your screen.
Hello, friends, and welcome back to ABN and the Trinity Channel during the first Apologetic Marathon of 2016. Today is the first day of this 2-week marathon, and we have just 20 shows this week alone. We had a show today, Does Islam Elevate the Status of Women? And this is show number 2 of 20 that are happening between now and Friday night. So right now we're doing a show with Genevieve Marnin and also with 3 Skype guests. We have Josh Braum, we have Clinton Wilcox, and we have Dr. Richard Weichert. And we're talking about the case for life inside and outside the womb. So right before the commercial, we'd heard Clinton answer one of the questions that we had, and I wanted to swing that to Dr. Richard Weichert. Sir, what would you have to say in regard to those issues on what you've studied?
Well, in relation to the question,
looks like we have a problem with the audio.
address the issue in a way that I think would catch a lot of people who've thought about these issues and who are sort of sophisticated in thinking about pro-life issues. But there's a lot of people who have a more naive view when you ask the question that you'd asked him earlier about, is this entity in the womb just a part of the mother's body? And that is, I think a lot of the people who have this naive view just see it as just another organ, a mass of tissue. I think you used that term earlier too in the show about people seeing it as a mass of tissue as part of the mother's body. But of course, scientifically that doesn't make sense because if you look at the DNA and the chromosomes that are in that entity in the womb, whatever you want to call it, I would call it a baby, but whatever you want to call it, it has distinct DNA, different from the mother. If any forensic scientist took a tissue sample from that fetus in the womb and then took a tissue sample of the mother, they would identify them as separate, distinct organisms. So they would not say this is the same organism, this is the same thing in the womb. The entity in the womb is not identical. It's different than every other cell in that mother's body. And so I think that's another way we can make a very strong case to say, look, this is not just another part of the mother's body. It's a distinct organism that's been created there. And if you think about other animals and plants as well, and their embryological development, I think you can see that also. Think about a chicken, for example, laying an egg. Okay, the egg that is laid is outside of the mother's body, but it is a one-celled organism that starts out and then develops into a multicellular organism that becomes then the baby chick and then becomes the full-grown chicken. It's completely outside of the mother that it develops. And so we can see that this is another reason why it doesn't make sense to say this is just another part of the mother. It is a distinct organism that's being created there.
Okay, so when we have a 23 chromosomed human sperm and a 23 chromosomed human egg and that egg is fertilized, that is the point where we have a new, unique, individual human being. That's when they're created. And I think that's what Dr. Richard Weikart is referring to, of, okay, this is not part of her body, because once that is fertilized, that is a new being with a different DNA than the father, a different DNA than the mother, and even perhaps a different blood type, right? So it is distinct from that point. So as we said earlier, well, the sperm and egg are alive. So to say, well, when does life begin? Well, all these things are alive. So there's not really any part. But when does that new person come into existence? And whether it's a fetus, a zygote, an embryo, tissue's kind of impersonal word to use, but I mean, what type of embryo, what type of zygote, what type of fetus? Human? Okay. Well, then that's the issue that we're talking about here. And that's very important, I think, because a lot of these scientific facts that we're bringing in aren't known by a lot of people. And a lot of people do not have these details. They don't know. They're not making an informed decision, I would say, right? And you have talked about some work that you're doing that will make sure that females know exactly what they're doing before they do it. Can you share with our audience a little bit about that?
Well, in Michigan for sure, and in many, many other states around the country, we have informed consent laws, which basically say the women have to be told how far along they are in their pregnancy, what that fetal development looks like, whether it's a baby this size or a baby this size, and what they're doing and the procedure that they're going to be using. So they have to know what it is they're doing. And in fact, many states require ultrasounds. And we know that when women see an ultrasound, they see the distinct baby. They see those little legs moving. They see it moving around. They see its little face and everything else. And they realize that is a separate human being from themselves. So while we can't force a woman to look at the ultrasound, many states do require that a doctor performs an ultrasound. And we know that that absolutely changes women's hearts. Yeah. They realize what they're doing. They realize what that being is inside them, that it isn't a blob of tissue. Yeah. So
definitely.
So we do encourage informed consent because this is a medical procedure, and you really should know what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And like you pointed out, around the world, many, many, many women are ignorant. They are uninformed. They don't know the fetal development. They don't know the process. They don't really know what's going to happen to them in an abortion. And frankly, that's just wrong.
Okay. And Josh, I want to go to you with one of these devil's advocate kind of questions. Based on what she had just talked about, we know that this is the case a lot when a young girl or woman who is raped, and they have a traumatic experience. And then a lot of pro-choice people will say, well, abortion's okay in the case of rape because the woman has had a traumatic experience and we shouldn't put her through a second traumatic experience of actually having that baby that she did not choose to become impregnated with. So I'm telling you, Josh, abortions should be okay in the case of rape because we don't want to add to that traumatic experience. What do you have for me?
I'm glad you asked, because there's a lot of pro-life people that don't think that pro-life men should ever talk about this issue. That should just be pro-life women that talk about this issue. And I'm really glad you asked because I think both sides are really important. I think pro-life men need to get a lot better at talking about this issue with a lot more sensitivity, because what typically happens, and this is frustrating for me when I see it, is the pro-life person will immediately go to talking about the baby and how, of course, a baby's rights shouldn't be based on how it was conceived. And I agree with that. But it's like, who did you just forget to talk about? The woman. And so what I so appreciate about Steve Wagner, who's the director of Justice for All, who really emphasizes that we need to first acknowledge how horrible rape is. I think pro-lifers assume that pro-choice people already kind of, oh, of course, we all agree that rape is bad. Let's just talk about the baby. No, they don't. necessarily understand that. And if we just talk about the baby, then it seems like we have fetus tunnel vision, like we can not see any other horrible things besides abortion. And if we come across that way, they won't take our moral compass seriously. And so here's the way that I think we ought to respond if someone asks about rape. In fact, it's the way that I responded to a woman in the Denver airport several years ago who flat out asked me that as we were talking about the issue. She said, "What about rape?" And I said, "I think rape is one of the worst things that I know about." Like you've triggered me. As soon as you said rape, I became angry and sad at the same time. Our society doesn't understand how bad that rape is, because I hear people sometimes, even pro-life people sometimes, say things that implicitly blame the survivor of rape, like if she hadn't had that drink, or if she hadn't worn that dress, or if she hadn't been in that part of town, instead of blaming the rapist. Our justice system, there's problems there because we haven't figured out how to prosecute the rapist without putting the survivor through an emotionally intense experience of facing her the accused. And I don't even know if there's an answer to that problem. But so there's a societal problem and a justice problem. And if she gets pregnant, she's got to probably make the worst, most difficult decision of her life. Of either doing the right thing and keeping the child. So I would say the right thing would be carrying to term, so 9 months of pregnancy and a painful delivery, to either keep the child, which is a very expensive 18-year commitment, or offering the child up for adoption, which is a heroic, selfless act, but it's emotionally painful for most birth moms. Or I think she's going to make the wrong choice and hire a doctor to kill her baby. So I think the rapist has committed multiple moral crimes. He should be in jail for a very, 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 very long time. But the reason that I'm against rape is because I think an act of violence was done against an innocent person. And the reason that I'm against abortion is because I think there was an act of violence done against an innocent person.
And this is a great point. And I think about, say a woman is raped, and that's a horrific experience. And I want to give Genevieve, as the only female on the show, an opportunity to talk about that as well from her perspective. But just based on what you said, even say a woman is raped and she does not become pregnant, is she allowed to go and kill the rapist because he gave her a traumatic experience? No, right? The justice system does not allow that. But then why is it okay for her to punish the innocent when she can't even punish the guilty, right? So it just doesn't make sense to say, well, we're going to punish this innocent human being because of the crime of another human being. Now, again, since we're still on that same topic, Genevieve, as the only female on this show right now, can you give your input as far as what would go through? You're going to be able to give, of course, a female's perspective on this. What can you add to what Joshua just said?
Well, what Josh said was absolutely right on the money, but I've never been raped, fortunately, but I have friends who have been. And it is the most personal violation against your person that you can imagine. I don't think people really understand. It's not just the physical trauma of being raped. It's also the psychological and the mental trauma of being violated. And it's got to be one of the most horrific ordeals that a woman could go through, to be honest with you. Fortunately, most rapes do not result in pregnancy, but about 4 to 5% do.
Yeah.
I mean, it does happen.
Yeah.
I can speak in Michigan. We have about 500 rape-conceived pregnancies a year, just in Michigan. Right. But what people fail to realize is that while that baby was conceived from rape, it's her child.
Yeah.
That's her baby.
Yeah.
I mean, women don't run around going, oh, my husband's baby kicked. They don't run around going, oh, wait, the rapist baby kicked. No, my baby, my child.
Yeah.
So what we're saying to women when we give them this, the rape and incest exception, is that they have to now, they've already been violated, now the society's putting this pressure on them that they should want to kill their own child.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a rapist who perpetrated this act on her, but it's just another violent act that we're asking her to go do. The rape was violent. Abortion is violent. Mm-hmm. I mean, I just showed you what it does. Yeah. This is not a pleasant situation. Now, granted, being pregnant for 9 months isn't pleasant either, but the outcome is wonderful. The outcome is a precious child. And something good could come out of this horrible act if we allow women, if we allow them to love their rape-conceived child. And so often, society doesn't let them. Society says, oh, you can't love that baby. Why not? Why not?
We've used this term, rape, multiple times in the last 10 minutes. These shows are broadcast all over the world, so all different countries. And what I think would be a good thing to do, even though it seems like, why are you even doing this? But from a woman's perspective, how do you define the word rape for any men throughout the world who don't know what you mean by that? You know, the act. I mean, how do you define that? I mean,
I define rape as if the woman does not want to engage in sexual intercourse, and through force, coercion, blackmail, threats, some other way to get her to engage in sexual intercourse. It doesn't always have to be, in my opinion, and in fact, in the legal system's opinion, it doesn't have to be a stranger who jumped you in an alley. It doesn't even have to result in physical injury to you. It's just that somebody violated you in the most personal way against your wishes. So to me, rape can be the college girl who's passed out in the dorm room and some guy has his way with her and she doesn't even know it. I'm sorry, that's rape. She did not consent to that. Now, I'm speaking to women around the world, and there are horrific acts of violence that are being perpetrated on women in certain parts of this country that are indescribable and horrific. So I don't want to minimize what's going on in those cases by equating it to what's going on here. But you know, the reality is you were violated against your wishes. And that's the simple definition of rape.
Dr. Weichert, when you look to the topic of abortion and the case for life, again, inside and outside the womb is the title of your new book. What do you see as far as the emotional attachment between a mother and her child, even outside the womb? I mean, this is technically one of the devil's advocate questions of abortion is okay if the mother cannot support the baby emotionally. But we know there's an emotional attachment when the baby's in here and when the baby is out here, you know, whether the baby is 6 weeks old or 6 years old, that emotional attachment but in a family.
Yeah, quite clearly the mother does have an emotional attachment to the child, and that's why someone mentioned earlier about how difficult it is to give up the child for adoption, which is as I think Josh was the one who made that comment about it being a heroic thing for them to do that, even though it's a very difficult decision to make. So yes, there is this emotional attachment that the women have with their babies, and in fact, this is why so many women go through such turmoil when they do abort their children, because that attachment even exists before it's born, and many women suffer from all sorts of depression and emotional problems as a result of going through with the decision to abort, and later on regret having made that kind of decision. Obviously, once the child is born, that attachment grows even stronger, which I think, by the way, there's a really, I'm sort of maybe getting a little bit off topic here, but it is on topic. I think if I'll bring it around on topic here. Steven Pinker, who's an evolutionary psychologist at Harvard University, did an article about women who were killing their babies after birth, or a lot of times right after they were born, committing infanticide. This was in 1997. There were several big, high-profile cases, one in which a girl who was at a high school prom, gave birth, put her child in the trash can, and went back out in the prom and continued doing that. Steven Pinker said, infanticide is something that has been programmed into us through our evolutionary history because women have to, and this was his words, coolly assess their newborn infants to determine whether or not they have survival value, whether or not they're sort of up to snuff and can survive and are going to grow and reproduce your genes and such. And that's why our Pleistocene ancestors, he said, have actually infanticide sort of programmed into us. And so he said this is sort of what's hardwired. Infanticide, he said, is hardwired into us. And in fact, there's a number of anthropologists and primatologists who've made similar kind of arguments that Sarah Hardy, being one of the most prominent ones of these, who's done a lot of studies of primates, has said that we're pro-choice by biology, or we're biologically programmed to be pro-choice because we have to decide whether or not our babies have value even after they've been born. Now, this is nonsense. Pinker did not go out and interview a bunch of women to find out whether they coolly assessed, that's the exact term he used, coolly assessed their infants after they were born. In fact, most women are very attached to their infants even before they're born, even while they're still in the womb, and especially once they come out. And they're not interested in coolly assessing to see if they should commit infanticide. These cases of infanticide that were committed in the United States at that time, and most subsequently, were acts of desperation where these women needed some love and support to be able to help them to care for their children.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
You know, it's interesting that he mentioned that because there was a rash of these kinds of infanticide situations, and it prompted the safe haven laws in the United States, which allow a woman who's in a panicked or desperate situation to take this newborn infant, take it to a hospital, a police department, a fire station, drop it off, no questions asked. So she's already gone through the 9 months of labor, pregnancy, and then the labor and delivery. The hard part's done. So why kill this child when some other person would be happy to adopt this baby? And so just so people know, in America, every single state in America has a safe haven law. So if any woman who's listening to this is finding herself in a very bad situation, she can take that baby, no questions asked, drop it off at a hospital, police department, or fire department. It's really a better option than infanticide.
Yes, definitely. No doubt about that. Speaking of what you had just said about the safe haven zone and adoption, I was about to turn to Clinton and give him one of these devil's advocate questions. So continuing on with what Genevieve just said, Clinton, my claim is that abortion is okay if the mother cannot support the baby financially.
Okay, yeah. If the woman can't support the child financially, I would say that that's not a valid reason for an abortion. And the way that we would show this is that we use a technique developed by Scott Klusendorf, who's my boss at LTI. He uses a technique called trot out the toddler, in which we would say, okay, so let's fast forward a couple of years. It's not a child who's in the womb, it's a child who's already been born. So we have a toddler now. So suppose a woman has a toddler and she loses her job, doesn't feel like she can financially support this child anymore. Maybe she has, an older child or two that she needs to feed and doesn't think she can feed this one and feed her older kids, or just doesn't feel for whatever reason that she can't financially support the child. So we would agree that that poverty is a difficult situation for a woman to be in. But the question is, should that woman be allowed to kill her toddler because she doesn't feel like she can financially support the toddler? Well, most people, if they're with their conscience is correct, would say, well, no, she can't kill her child. And so then we would say, okay, well, if she can't kill her child because of financial difficulties, then if the unborn is fully human like that toddler is, which, of course, if we haven't established that yet, might be seen as a question-begging response, but that's why you would then go in and have that discussion about what is the unborn child. But essentially, if the unborn human being is a full human person like that toddler is, then it seems like the issue is not really whether or not she can financially support the child. It's what is the child. If the child is human, then we can't kill the child because of financial difficulty.
And that tactic that Clinton had just mentioned, the trotting out the toddler, that is very effective tactic to use with pro-choice people, not just about the can't support it financially, but basically any thing that they use to say, well, it's okay for abortion because of this. Trotting out the toddler, the terminology that he just used was just basically taking that to, transferring that to a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, or any age child outside the womb who, is kind of pretty independent, other than, of course, still needing mom and dad, but, 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old, and giving it and importing it into that situation. Because you say, okay, well, if my 5-year-old is having a hard life, or I'm having a hard time supporting my 5-year-old, trotting out the toddler is just giving them, basically taking it to a statement of extreme.
Right.
And really using hyperbole to kind of let them know, if they don't realize it already, what they're implying by saying that abortion is okay in this situation or that situation.
You know, and I always like to say, ask somebody who grew up poor, ask someone who grew up in abject poverty if they would rather have their life or not.
Right.
And I'll bet any money that most people would say, I'm glad to be alive even though I grew up poor.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Well, I
poor is a relative term.
Right. I mean, I think in general, I mean, anyone who's pro-abortion is always coming from someone who's born already. You know?
Right,
So
right.
it's like, it's
funny how it works that
yeah.
way.
But Josh, I want to go to you, and perhaps you and Clinton and Dr. Weichert, if you're familiar with this acronym as well. A lot of pro-life apologists, they use this acronym SLED, S-L-E-D, and each of those letters stand for a particular word, and these are them: size, level of development, environment, and degree of dependency. And this is a very powerful acronym for Christians, for pro-lifers to keep in mind, because so many different issues or excuses is probably the better word, that it's okay for a person to have an abortion, they fall under these categories. So let's go to Josh first and talk about size in the acronym SLED.
Well, let me ask you if I can do something different and let Clinton talk about SLED, because we started using a different argument a few years ago that we had a lot better results with. And could I maybe just take 2 minutes and explain that different argument to you?
Yeah, go ahead. Let's do that first.
Awesome, thanks. So I was at UC Davis just 2 weeks ago. We were having an outreach, and I was talking to a few girls that were very dogmatically and seemed pretty close-minded about being pro-choice. But one of them actually asked me, she said, I want to hear what your view is. Why are you here? What is your main argument? And I said, I think I can explain to you why I'm here in about 2 minutes. He said, okay, go ahead. And I said, well, as I look around the campus, I said, you know, I'm a pretty open-minded guy. I'm open-minded about most things. But one of the few things that I'm very, very closed-minded about is this view, that everybody that I can see right now has an equal right to life. They all have an equal right to life. This is very non-controversial. But there's something kind of weird about that, right? Because I see some people who are tall, and I see some people who are short, and I see some people who are really smart, and I see some people who are trying their best, right? And there's all these differences. So how can we possibly explain this idea that we're all have an equal right to life when we all have these differences? Well, I think there must be something that we all have in common. And it's got to be something that we all have equally. That's very important. It can't be something that you can have more or less of, or it won't explain an equal right to life. What is it that we have equally? And there are a lot of pro-choice responses to that when they define personhood. They'll say things like sentience and self-awareness and things like that. But the problem is all of those answers make one of two huge mistakes. They either allow things like squirrels into kind of the equal right to life camp, or they exclude things like newborns that we obviously ought to have an equal right to life. The answer that I think makes the most sense is that the thing that we have in common, the thing that we have equally, is humanness, is that we are all equally human. You can't be part human, you're either human or you're not. And if that's the right answer to this question, if that's the thing that we all have equally, that's the thing that matters, and if the unborn have that, have humanness, which they do, then we have to give the unborn an equal right to life. And the last thing I said before I stopped talking was I said, notice something about what I just said. I'm not making a religious argument. And I'm not making an emotional argument. Like, I don't get the warm fuzzies when I look at a picture of an embryo. I don't. Like I got the warm fuzzies yesterday when I saw a Facebook picture of my friends just had this baby. Here's a cute baby. And it's like, oh, the baby. And I had that thing. I don't get that when I look at a zygote. It looks like a fuzzy orange to me. I'm not pro-life because of emotional reasons. I'm pro-life because it's the most rational conclusion I can come to. Because I'm not starting with religion or emotion. I'm starting with equality as premise one. I'm starting from equality and reasoning from there, and I can't think of a good reason to rule out the unborn from humanity.
Right. And it's so important to, and we keep going back to the same fundamental question of what is it? And when we say what is it, is not whatever term you want to use as far as, zygote, embryo, that kind of thing, but as far as its nature. Is it human or is it not human? Because that, like Josh just said, I mean, that is this defining factor, because that is what separates it from everything else. That's what separates it from animals, from plant, killing a tree. Well, you might hate trees, but it's not murder because it's not a human being, right? Now, we do want to go to Clinton with the SLED acronym, but we actually have a caller right now. So we want to take a call from Chris. Chris, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for tuning into our show. And do you have a question?
Yes, I do. I'd like to make a brief comment. I just want to say hi to everybody. Great job to the host and the guest.
Oh,
thank you for your great. You're welcome. Thank you for your great show. I'm watching the show and amazed at how such shows are important and valuable. There's a lot of suffering and turmoil to women who are raped by criminals. What do you think after the rape? Abortion after the first week of conception, or to live in guilt versus depression for your whole life? Sorry to ask this difficult question, but I'm excited about what you are saying, and I'm concerned of mothers who might commit suicide, for example, because of anger or guilt or shame and emotional life crisis. What would you suggest for such women and her parents if she's a younger woman, like a teenager? I'll hang up here, but I'll just want to thank you for such a wonderful program and a great channel, and God bless Trinity Channel.
Thank you so much, Chris, for calling in. And I want to give it to Genevieve here. The first thought that I have, I mean, I've talked with many ladies who work at pro-life ministries, right? Sometimes they're right next door to Planned Parenthood, which is basically a pro-choice, or more specifically pro-death, when it comes to what are you going to do with that human being in there. Right. But I've asked life ministry people before, and I'm sure Genevieve would have the same answer, is do you ever hear women who get pregnant, not necessarily rape, but they get pregnant and that wasn't really what they were planning on doing, right? They get pregnant out of wedlock or whatever else. Right. And there are many women who have had abortions. Right. And I ask, do you commonly have women who regret aborting their baby?
Oh.
And all the time, they say, we have many women who live, the rest of their life in depression or something else, because they think back of that was a life inside of me and I ended it. What could have happened if I had that child, and so on, especially when they get to the point in their life to where they want a baby. All of a sudden, hey, I had the chance, it's like live and learn kind of thing, unfortunately for these women. But I ask these same people, how often do you have a woman who gets pregnant without, again, planning to do so? She has the baby, and then days later, weeks later, years later, decades later, thinks, well, I shouldn't have had that baby after all. It's like, do you ever hear that?
I literally just read, there's a movement in France that's, of all places, that's starting for women who can complain about, I regret having my child.
Just started.
I just came across it literally last week when I was doing some research, which blew my mind. But by the same token, I guess you can have a regret in anything in life, but and it could just be that this woman who is temporarily upset, maybe her kids are giving her a hard time, children are difficult sometimes, as you know, but I just thought that was interesting. But that would be a tiny, tiny minority compared to the amount of women who regret having had an abortion.
Compare the two. It's going to be a huge difference.
But if I could go back to Chris, his call, let's go to him. Well, if I'm correct in his understanding, a woman was raped, had an abortion at 1 week, I think is what he was saying, and then regrets it? Or was he suggesting that she would feel guilty about the rape and was concerned about her committing suicide because of the rape? I didn't understand.
Both.
Okay,
yeah, let's go.
So if the woman was raped, and in certain cultures, I think that it brings shame upon the families, from what I've understood. They can be shunned from the families for being raped, for being the victim. Their own families can shun them and cause tremendous grief. And if they're impregnated because of the rape, in some cultures, it can be a death sentence for them from what I understand, which is horrifying. So what I'd love to see happen is a paradigm shift that looks at women who've been raped as the victim and in need of support.
Yeah.
Love, compassion, support.
Yeah.
Because that's really the answer to anyone who's suicidal, to anyone who's feeling guilty, anyone who's in a crisis situation.
Even if they're not pregnant.
Even if they're not pregnant.
Yeah.
So, but in the case of a woman who gets raped, makes the knee-jerk decision to go and have an abortion, and now feels guilty and suicidal for that, we have programs in America. Rachel's Vineyard is one of those programs, which is, it's available in a lot of the different pro-life crisis pregnancy centers and whatnot have Rachel's Vineyard, which is post-abortive counseling, because women do feel guilty about it and they do need help. So we look at women who have had an abortion as the second victim.
Okay.
Because they've made the choice to kill their own child.
Yeah.
That's a horrible, horrible choice. I heard one woman describe it one time that women want to have an abortion the way that a caged animal wants to chew its own leg off to get free. That stuck with me because I think there's a lot of truth to that statement, that women, generally speaking, don't want to kill their own child. But for all these other reasons, they feel that they have no choice.
Yeah.
So they need our love and support. They are the second victim.
Yeah. And some women just instinctively recognize right away what it is. We don't have to ask them, what is it? What do you consider it? Right away, they say, oh, yeah, I'm pregnant. Oh, that's a baby in there.
Yes.
They don't even use these terms that we were talking about earlier. But yeah, it's like I really appreciate having you on the show to give a female's perspective, because we know that we do have male and female guests, or not guests, but viewers from around the world.
Yeah.
So we want to go to Clinton still, but we do have another question now, and this is actually coming from YouTube, so I'm going to read it here. At what point does a human being receive its soul? I.e., does the unborn have a soul? And I'm going to open this up to any of our three scholars here who would like to answer that. At what point does a human being receive its soul? Does the unborn have a soul?
Anybody?
Anyone?
Flip a coin.
Clinton, you want to go?
Well, I guess I could take a stab at answering it.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't ordinarily make religious arguments when I talk about the abortion issue.
Okay.
Because I think that just showing that the unborn is a human being from fertilization is enough to justify our position.
Okay.
And as Scott Glusendorf says, the law does not have to take a position on the human soul to make murder illegal. So if we can show that the unborn is a human being from fertilization, then that's enough to justify our pro-life stance, and it's enough to justify making abortion illegal. If we want to talk about the human soul, I would say that the human soul comes into existence at the same time that the human being does at fertilization. Now, there are different schools of thought within Christianity about what exactly the soul is. There are substance dualists, for example, who would say that we have a body, but we are a soul, and the soul is the immaterial aspect of our existence. I've become recently more enamored of what's called hylomorphism, which is basically an Aristotelian Thomistic idea or understanding of the soul, which is that human beings are irreducible composites of form and matter. The form being kind of the immaterial thing that makes us what we are, directs our development and our potentialities and all those kinds of things, and the matter being the underlying stuff that kind of goes to make us up. And so once the human being comes into existence, now the form is not it appears human. It's not talking about the appearance, because what's human is human from the very beginning. But it's more of like the thing that grounds our nature, makes us who we are. And so once the human being comes into existence, the soul does as well, because it's the soul that's been traditionally understood as what animates the body.
So when all of us are thinking about things and have emotions about things, that's our soul. That's who we are, and that's a non-physical reality. But then that soul animates our body. And when a soul leaves a body, that's a corpse. So the body's still there, but the immaterial is gone, right? But and Clinton, are you referring to anthropological hylomorphism? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, sort of. It's the idea of like the human person, what makes us who we are, those kinds of things. So yeah.
Okay, so the form and matter, or that composite of what we see in the Bible, of how God created man, and then he breathed into him I can't even think of the wording.
The breath of life.
The breath of life, okay? And he
Right.
became a living soul, right? So we see
Right.
that it's a man. It became a living person when we had that composite, when we had that material and immaterial. We see that when Jesus rose from the dead, same thing. It's like the second person of the Trinity took on a second nature, a human nature, and then when he died, it wasn't just his soul that went to heaven, like that's the goal of all of this, right? He rose in a resurrected body. He was a complete person. He was a composite. And I know you bring up history and can study all this stuff, or like you say, like the physical matter is bad. Like our goal is to get out of this physical body and just become, spirits in whatever realm or something like that. But yeah, I do see a lot of strong evidence and biblical support for the hylomorphic view. So we thank you for that.
Someplace in the Bible, and I don't know where exactly, it said that God knew you before he knit you in your mother's womb.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I don't know whether that implies you had your soul at that point, but I know if God is touching the whole thing, I'm guessing that's when you have your soul.
And
I mean, I'm not your guests who are intellectuals,
Right.
but you know.
Yeah, and he's omniscient, so he knows
Yeah.
all things.
He
and
knows all things.
He's outside of time, so he knows our
Yes.
temporal future.
And he knew you before you were conceived in your mother's womb. So, I don't know. I would dare say it's when you're conceived.
Well, I would think that, I mean, all of our guests, I mean, I think what really makes these strong cases for the pro-life position is when we can take the Christian worldview and what the Bible says and combine that with actual evidence in science and so on.
Right.
And that's where the apologetics comes in, giving a reasonable defense for why we believe what we believe based on logic and evidence. So it isn't just a blind faith that many people have religious-wise. Even if somebody has a specific idea about abortion or what it is in there, I mean, if there's absolutely no evidence for what they believe, well, that's blind faith about what is in your womb, just like it's blind faith to follow a man-made religion. And again, that doesn't have any backing to it,
Right.
So it's always great to make informed decisions, whether that is about eternity or whether that is about this temporal life. And is it, are women making informed decisions? And when we know someone personally who's thinking about abortion, if we can use all these tools that our guests have brought up, that is just going to allow us to help our loved one.
Right.
Whether they are in a situation where they're pregnant because of an atrocity, or say they became pregnant and then all of a sudden have some type of external event come up that they weren't expecting.
Or a fetal anomaly.
Yeah. Or we even mentioned the ectopic pregnancies and ectopic abortions, technically. Genevieve, I want to give you an opportunity to talk about that, because we have made a case that abortion is wrong because of the nature of what it is. No matter what term you want to use for it, if it's human, that's what makes it wrong.
Right.
But there are situations we know of medically and scientifically, and one that we had mentioned earlier before the show was ectopic pregnancies and abortions that take place. So can you, really quick, explain what that type of pregnancy is and what the results are of that if it isn't dealt with, and how abortion is usually the solution for that.
Right.
And
I hate to refer to it as abortion in these particular cases,
Okay.
but it is. It's technically abortion. It's ending the life of a human being. And an ectopic pregnancy is when the fertilized egg implants in the fallopian tube as opposed to the uterus. It can't survive. And if it's allowed to continue to grow, the tube will eventually burst and the woman can hemorrhage to death. So in cases of ectopic pregnancies, most pro-lifers that I know believe that it's acceptable to go in, remove the tube, or use a chemical process to kill the developing embryo in order to save the life of the mother. And in that case, it's really a matter of, if you don't save the mom's life, mom and baby die.
Yeah.
So it's really not making a choice between one life or the other. It's really about picking one life versus no life.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how we look at it. So, and there are a handful of medical situations, very rare, but a handful where the mother's life really is in jeopardy and abortion is the only instrument able to save her life. She's hemorrhaging or some other instance. But I spoke with a pro-life OBGYN who was in practice for 40 years, and he said in his 40 years of practice, only 4 times did he have to suggest abortion to save a woman's life.
Okay.
So
in these rare cases of ectopic pregnancies, or even, and this is something that we didn't have time to get to, maybe we'll have, we can do a quick minute for it, is this claim of abortion is okay in the case of incest. We did talk about rape earlier,
right.
And this can fall into the same category, because what I'm getting at is many times people who are pro-choice, they say, well, what about rape or incest? It's like they go to the extreme to try to justify the act of killing that human, killing that baby. And one question that I will ask them, first thing I'll let them know is that that is a very small percentage of abortion cases.
about 1%.
About 1%, okay? Yeah. So if only 1% of abortions take place because of rape or incest, to really find out what they're thinking, if that is truly their concern, again, rape or incest, I'll ask them, I'll say, okay, just for the sake of argument, if I agree with you that those 1% of abortions are okay, which I don't in the case of rape or incest, but just say I did, would you agree with me that 99% of all other abortions are wrong? Because their answer to that question is going to reveal to you if they're truly concerned about rape and incest as specific cases,
right.
or if they're just using those extreme cases to justify the abortion of any child at any time.
Right. Can I jump in on the incest thing?
Yeah.
And it's going back to my definition that you asked me about what is the definition of rape. Incest falls in that definition. This girl was in some way, shape, or form coerced, pressured, and sometimes just forcibly raped by a family member. So it's rape. So I don't like even the fact that they call it rape or incest, because incest is rape.
Yeah.
In most cases, I mean, unless it's consensual, in which case, what are we talking about here?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it could be adult.
I mean, the point is the pro-choice people like to use, like you said, these extreme examples, rape and incest. Well, that means it wasn't consensual on the part of the woman. So in that case, that definition of incest is rape.
Okay.
In my opinion.
Yeah. Okay. One thing we want to do here, because we are kind of closing this show here shortly in about 8 minutes. But what I want to do, I mean, we have so many things that we could this could be a 3-hour show just because of all the things that we could talk about. But I want to give each of our guests, let's give a couple minutes to each person, and just your closing thoughts on the issue. Any tips you'd like to give to people out there who are really looking to get better equipped and talking to their pro-choice friends. Any kind of information you want to give us. And anyway, let's start with Josh, and then we'll go to Clinton, Dr. Weichert, and then we'll come back to Genevieve. Let's go to Josh first. Josh, what are your closing thoughts? Give you a couple minutes.
Yeah, I would say there are even just basic things that you can do to make your conversations go better. So we talk about asking good questions to try to understand what this person is actually thinking, instead of just assuming what they're thinking. We talk about listening really well, turning off that inner monologue that's going on in your head that's sometimes blocking you from actually hearing what this person is saying, finding genuine common ground when possible. So that the person doesn't think that you're polar opposites, and you can have like this really great conversation, which might actually be surprising to them. So I think that's important. But I think the final thing I would say, beyond obviously keep learning about it, there are a lot of great pro-life arguments. There are a lot of wonderful resources online. You can check out our blog and our website at equalrightsinstitute.com. There's a lot of great resources. I would encourage people to actually go a further step than what we often talk about in apologetics, which is something that I call relational apologetics. Cultivate friendships with pro-choice people. I have a friend in Canada who reached out to me several years ago, and we began emailing back and forth. She was a pro-choice lesbian atheist in Canada, but we became really good friends. And after talking about the issue for about 140 emails, and then about a year and a half of Skype calls, she became pro-life. And Deanna wasn't the kind of person that was going to be persuaded by merely a blog post or merely an article or something like that. She needed friendship. Some people need to be able to have conversations with a person that they trust, that they trust as someone who is both smart and virtuous, which makes a really powerful chord. And then you can build upon those conversations. As you said, we can barely cover the surface of this topic in an hour and a half. Well, that's true when we talk to people too. I needed a year and a half with Deanna. And I needed 5 years with a friend of mine named Ronnie before she became pro-life. And so, what if we had this attitude that I think that Jesus would have us have of pro-choice people, where we don't think of them as the enemy, but we think of them as image bearers, like the unborn are. And what if we humanize them as well, and show that we love them too, and see them come to understand the pro-life position well over a period of many conversations, and then become pro-life.
Okay, thank you so much. We have just a few minutes left. Clinton, let's give you 1 minute. Dr. Weichart, 1 minute. Genevieve, 45 seconds, because we need to wrap it up. Clinton, go ahead.
All right. Well, my answer is pretty similar to Josh. Essentially, we need to understand that there's a difference between being right and being persuasive. It's pointless being right if you can't persuade anybody. And now, I'm not talking about looking at the other person as if they're an argument to be won. That's not what I mean. We need to treat other people with respect. We need to treat them as people who bear the image of Christ, people who are made in God's image. And the way that we do that is by treating them respectfully and taking their ideas seriously. Once we do that, then we would be able to open up the door to become a lot more persuasive to people, because just sharing the truth isn't loving. We need to, as Christ taught us, we need to share the truth in love. And if we do that, if we show the other person that we actually care about them, and we legitimately care about the women that we're trying to say we don't believe should have the legal recourse to abortion, we need to show them first that we care about them, and then they'll understand that we care about the women in this issue as well.
Amen. Thank you. And that was 59 seconds. Good job. Dr. Weichart, please, 1 minute, sir.
Yes, one of the things I try to do in my new book, The Death of Humanities, I try to show that these issues about pro-life, and also I deal with issues of euthanasia, infanticide, and such, that they're all embedded in a larger worldview. And so we need to pay a lot of attention to developing a Christian worldview on all sorts of levels, because there's a lot of people out there, and especially intellectual circles, who are coming at this issue by believing that human life does not have any value because they don't believe in a creator, they don't believe there's any objective morality, and so they've dispensed with a lot of different elements of the Christian worldview. And so to try to argue pro-life is one element of that, but you're not going to get anywhere if they're disagreeing with you on some very, very fundamental levels. So we have to approach this from a broader perspective and try to win people on a lot of levels. And I like what Josh and Clinton have both said too about doing this relationally too, because they're going to be won by love. They're going to see the love that we have as Christians. That's going to be one thing I think is going to draw a lot of people as well.
Amen. Genevieve.
Amen. I ditto what he just said, but real quick, regarding women, specifically the women themselves, remember that a woman who's contemplating an abortion is in a crisis. Whether you think it's a crisis for her. So meet her where she's at. Whatever her crisis is, try and love her through whatever it is. And the crisis pregnancy centers do that. You need diapers, we've got diapers. You need support, we've got support. So I think that's paramount when you're talking to abortion-minded women. And remember, sometimes anger, when they're coming at you with anger, it's to cover their own guilt, their own hurt. So just remember to love them through that.
Yeah, we just want to remember that the thing, I'll just use that generically, the thing inside is a person, and the person who you're talking with is a person as well. And we know that all people are made in the image of God, regardless of the size. It goes back to what is it? If it's human, it's valuable. And we have life. We don't want to take life unjustly from an innocent human being. And even more important than that is eternal life. And we want to let everyone know that it is our prayer that all of you, if you have never repented and put your trust in Christ and received the gift of eternal life, that is the most important thing in addition to what we are talking about on this show. Because again, life begets life, and just the existence of anything that's alive points to an eternal, uncreated creator. So just the existence of ourselves, the existence of a life that we can beget, you go backwards, that's just a case for the existence of God and a first cause. So I want to thank all of our guests, Genevieve here in the studio, as well as Josh, Clinton, and Dr. Weichert. Please look up Dr. Weichert's books on Amazon. They are available. And you can find myself, Genevieve, Josh, Clinton, and Dr. Weichert all on Facebook. So please add us as a friend. If you have any questions, send us your questions. If you want resources, books, documentaries, training resources, etc., ask us, and we will be more than happy to let you know. Now, again, this is the second show in our 20 shows between now and Friday. So we want to thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for listening to our guests. Thank you again to our guests. And please come back in just about a half hour for the next show, which is the Hajj and the Mormon Temple, which will be a very interesting show. So we will see you in 30 minutes. Until then, God bless you.
To all our viewers, you can now watch our shows on the following platforms, such as Android tablets, Android boxes, Android phones, a Chromecast stick, your smart TV, or a Roku stick. For more information, please call the number on your screen or visit us at trinitychannel.com.
Trinity Channel is now publicly streaming on Roku. There is no need for a code anymore, and through Roku, you can watch us 24/7 on your TV. You can find us through two ways on Roku. The first way is through the streaming channel category. The second way is by searching for Trinity Channel in your search bar. For more information, please call the numbers at your screen.
Thank you so much for watching the Trinity Channel. We are now airing in 8 states in the U.S. You can watch us through our YouTube channels at ABN English, Trinity Channel, or our website at trinitychannel.com. Be sure to look out for our live shows, which you can find when they are airing through our Facebook.
And then the end will come.
It is not you who chose me, but I who chose you, and appointed you to go and bear fruit that will remain, so that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he will give you.
Just asking a clarification on your answer. Saudi Arabia is the perfect picture of Islam, and you support the royal family of Saudi Arabia. You support that government.
We are called to bear fruit that will last. Here at ABN, we pray for support in allowing this fruit, which is spreading the word of God throughout the nations, to grow. Currently, ABN is broadcasting to more than 4 continents worldwide on 3 major satellites, including North America, Europe, Australia, North Africa, and the Middle East.
The Lord Jesus Christ is God who's come to rescue and save us. He took my sin, my shame, my pain.
بأنك تكون مقطوع الخير في الخلق والإحسان والصفات الحميدة.
نكاح محمد لزينب زوجة زيد.
At some point, you have to have a first cause, an uncaused cause, or an uncreated creator.